Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jono White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jono White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jono White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up to do just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another Leadership Conversations podcast episode. I am so excited for today's guest. I have Joe Bremgartner, who is the Associate Superintendent of People Services at Fontana Unified School District. Joe's a career educational leader, a people and culture executive, and he began his career as an elementary teacher. And that's where he learned that as human beings, we're always in a state of evolving. We learn new skills every day and should always seek to apply our new knowledge.
Joe then became an elementary school principal, later a central office executive, and throughout his career, he's always focused on the people side of the organization, which I can't wait to chat about with him because I'm equally passionate about that. And he knows that it's important to nurture the people around us, which I also am really passionate about. So this is going to be fun. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you.
It's so good to have you on. And just to get straight into it, I would love, and I know listeners would love as well, to hear some of the Joe Bremgartner story. How did you, as far back as you want, and as much or as little in terms of the life story, but as I was saying to you before we started recording, that leaders are human beings first and foremost, and that's why I love starting with the story of people like yourself doing important things, particularly in education. So yeah, tell us a bit of the Joe Bremgartner story.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. This is an exciting opportunity to just chat and share a little bit. I guess I would go back to when I began work because that type of experience is kind of what, along the way, my work life has shaped my leadership capacity and my skill set. So I started working when I was 14 years old at a hospital. And that obviously is not education related, but I worked in a small community hospital. I worked in the medical records department. I worked in the emergency room. I worked in data processing. But by the time I left, I had been the data processing supervisor for the hospital that I was at.
Wow.
And I worked there for 14 years. So I worked there from the time, well, actually 13 years, from the time I was 14 until the time I was 27.
Yeah.
And I think that actually was very a formative time for me. My parents were not particularly education focused. For them, it was important that you grow up, you get a job, you go out, you earn a living, and move on with things. But being in that hospital environment, I was surrounded by professionals of all different sorts, whether it was on the business side of running the hospital or on the emergency or nursing side or medical side of the facility. And so for me, I think being surrounded by all of those people who had careers, for me, that was kind of eye opening. That wasn't part of the story that I thought would be how my life played out. My parents, like I said, that wasn't important to them. And so
Mm.
I did that. And while I was working at the hospital, I went to college and ultimately I decided to become a teacher. And so during the time while I was working at the hospital, I got my teaching degree and then I was hired to become a teacher, an elementary school teacher. And again, it was a great opportunity. I worked with young students, anywhere from second grade through sixth grade. But the bulk of my time in elementary, I taught in what was called a multi-age classroom. And so I had fourth, fifth, and sixth graders all together in the same room. And I team taught with two other teachers. And it was just an amazing experience. Because of the age ranges, we had to develop our own curriculum from the ground up. We had to think about what was going to engage our students and make learning interesting and thought provoking for them. And so that was just a great way of learning to really understand the perspectives of kids and try to figure out what was going to motivate them to learn and then taking that knowledge and applying it to how are we going to introduce curriculum and materials so that they would be learning. In that same building, while I was teaching, I did my internship, and after I went back to school again, and I did my internship and got my administrative credential, and was hired the following year in a neighboring school district as an elementary principal. And again, it was an interesting opportunity for me because I was following a veteran administrator. He had been in the building for 24 or 25 years. He had virtually hired every staff member on that site. And coming in as a young administrator, I was not only the youngest member on site, but I was, a brand new leader. And so that was a little humbling because there was so much there was so much knowledge that already existed there, and there had been this pathway kind of set forward by the leader that had been there before. Everyone was used to him. He was beloved, and the community, he was very respected in the community, and so following him, those are pretty big footsteps to follow in. And along the way, the thing that I figured out was, how it's important to listen to people. As a leader, I think it's important that we listen as much as we speak. And
Yeah.
so listening and trying to understand kind of the perspectives of a staff that were a little fearful about the fact that they were getting a new administrator. They weren't entirely sure that they wanted a new administrator. They thought they could run the building on their own without a principal in charge, because there was just so much anxiety about having their leader leaving and someone else coming on board. But we bonded pretty quickly, and I worked with them along the way to build trust and respect, and I tried to honor their needs and what they felt were the kind of non-negotiable important parts about what happened in that building. But they also, as they gained trust with me, they were willing to follow me, and we moved the building forward. We took things to the next level. Kids definitely benefited from that time that we were all together there. Um, so I was in that building for 7 years, and then was asked by the superintendent of that district. It was a small district, but the assistant superintendent had retired. And so he asked me if I would be willing to come to the central office as the assistant superintendent. And again, great experience. I was working with colleagues, but now I was supervising people that, again, had all been there prior to me coming. I was supervising the other administrators who I saw as mentors when I came on board. And again, I think that there was some anxiety around that. I was this person that they knew, but they didn't really know what my leadership style would be when I was their supervisor. So listening to them, working with them, and trying to support them in their endeavors, I think was important. Um, from there, I took a little bit of a detour in my career, in that I was moving to a local community, a different community. And when I made that move, I was looking for positions available in that area, and only administrative position available that year in the entire region that I was moving to was an elementary principal. So I went back to being an elementary principal, and it was a great kind of life-changing moment for me, because not only was I learning a new community, but I was kind of stepping back in my career, and I felt a little strange. But at the same time, it was a great way to reintroduce myself to a community, and um, to go into a building that had some challenges. This was a site that had challenges with the previous administrator. Uh, they had gone to mediation a couple times with their administrator, and honestly, she was, I think, a very good person, just not the right personality match for that site. And so the year before I got there, half of the staff had left and had been replaced, because they just couldn't work together as a team anymore. And so one of the things that became my focus on that site was, how do I kind of reunite this staff, or bring a staff together? Half of the staff had been there for 20 years. The other half of the staff had been there less than a year. And so how do I unite this staff? And at the same time, it was a building that had a pretty significant special needs population.
Wow.
And so there were a lot of challenges on this site. And besides the special needs population and the staff that had been fractured, there was a very affluent portion of the community, and there was a very impoverished portion of this community, and very few people in between. So again, it felt like this would be a giant challenge. And what I actually found was, the reason why things worked on that site is that everybody believed, from the parents to the staff, that all of those kids belonged together, and that no matter what the challenges were, whether it was the special needs challenges or poverty or other issues, that they all could prop each other up and they were better together. And that was a great opportunity to just learn how to watch people understand their unique perspectives and try to understand where emotion or anxiety or even just student behaviors were coming from based on their history and their own perspectives of what was happening. So again, after that, I was asked to come to the central office again in that same district, and then later was invited to a neighboring district who was having challenges in their human resources department, and asked me to come in as kind of a person who had proven himself as kind of a uniter, and someone that could try to build labor relations and and help the staff to reconnect to the work at hand. So that was my previous experience prior to my current job. My current role, when I moved to California, I was looking for a position here, and I was hired in Fontana, a large district, and again, another set of new perspectives. It was a new community, a larger district than I had worked in the past. But again, I think that listening to others and trying to understand perspectives helps us to formulate the conversation. So that brings me to where I am now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And there's so much, there's sort of 20 questions I could ask about all those. I just love how you just told that quite succinctly about the different seasons. I think the question that probably comes to the top of my mind is about transition. So you've done a few. You've had a few transition roles where you've come in and transitioned from someone who was much loved and and everyone would have, that brings its own challenges when you're coming in, and then you've come in and been part of a transition where the previous person had it had been really difficult, and so half the people had left. So say someone listening is a leader and they are coming into a new role. What did you learn? What have you learned so far from the various different times that you've been transitioning into roles? What would be your advice to someone who's stepping into a new role, whether they're coming in and taking the place of someone much loved or coming into a messy situation? What have you learned?
Sure. Well, I think that it's first really important to get a sense for the needs of the role that you're coming into. And what that is coming into a role where you are where like there's an issue with staff or a brokenness, or whether it is coming into a role where things are perceived as being good, um, whether it's that they're perceived as being good or just maybe things are fine. I think it's important always to have a perspective, try to gain a perspective, number one, on what the staff perceives are their strengths and things that are kind of their non-negotiables. This is what we think work really well here, and these are the things we're proud of. And then also looking at what do they see as their challenges. Sometimes spot on. They know what the challenges are. They're just not sure how to navigate out of them. And other times they're not. And in those situations, I think we always work to find the best that we can, um, what their needs are. And once you have that kind of information gathering moment, then I think then it makes it much easier to plan for how you're going to move things forward, or how you're going to address the successes, or to keep things on track, or challenges on how to right the ship in times of challenge. So I think that's very important to try to understand the staff's perspective, as well as maybe even talking to other management to say how is this department or how is this organization perceived, and see if there's an alignment there. Sometimes the perceptions of different people are different, and that causes some hurdles to navigate through.
Now that's really good insight. How this might sound like a silly question, but how do you actually facilitate that information gathering? And for you, practically in your first couple of months in a new role, what are some things that you do or that you've done that have worked well to get a pulse for what people actually think?
Well, yeah, I think that's really important. What you just said is to get a pulse, and I think that starts with talking to my own supervisor to say, you're hiring me to come into this role. What are your objectives for me? What do you need me to do? What is the perception of the department or the organization? What challenges do you see, and how is there a way that you would like me to address those, or do you want me to kind of gather information and come back and talk with you? So I would start with the supervisor, but then I would go individually and talk to staff members. I sit down with people face to face, one on one, and say, hey, how are things going? What do you think is going really well? What are our challenges? What are you hoping that I can do for you here? And just having a very normal, natural conversation like we're having today, and just kind of listening carefully for little cues that people may be giving me as to what their feelings really are. Knowing that they can be reluctant, especially if they're unsure about their new boss, so to speak. They may be a little guarded. So I think that it's important to try to make them feel as comfortable as possible so that they can kind of let their guard down a bit and share truly where they're coming from.
Yeah, I really love that. One of the things that I really respected when I was in a previous role, we had someone new come on board, and she actually sought out everyone who she would be interacting with. It's not just direct, not the obvious people, but those who would be part of the wider team that she would be working in. And she made time to sit down with each one of us and really just say, tell me about you, tell me about what you do. I'm really interested. And I felt really heard about the part that I was leading, chatting with her. And I thought, this is it's such a simple but clever idea. There was just, I just came across a book called The Power of Focus, and it has this story in it, which I don't know if it's a true story or a fable. I think it's true, but I just don't want to go on record saying it's true. But I'm pretty sure it seems like it reads like they're telling a true story of a lady who came into a health situation where she knew she needed a kidney transplant. She went to her family. Some of them were very happy to do it, but there was not a blood type match. And so, in desperation, with not knowing that time was sort of running out, she went and basically started asking. She put it up on a notice board, and like it sounds so ridiculous. That's why I wondered if it was a fable. But they talked about her actually. Someone ended up coming along and saying, you know what, I'm okay with only having one kidney. I'll give you my kidney if it's going to help save your life. And the point of the story was, and they used her name in there in the book, it's called The Power of Focus, was that we often underestimate asking. And that's an extreme example of you wouldn't even think to ask people outside of your family, but she did. And someone actually said, you know what? Yeah, if it's going to save your life, I may not know you, but I don't need two kidneys. I'll be happy to have one. And then they talk about this principle of asking, and that's something that I think you've really articulated, is that ask your supervisor, your leader, what do you want from me? Help me understand, and then go and ask the people that you're working with. I think asking and listening. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? But it's honestly sort of such a key when you're transitioning into a new role.
Right, and I think it's more than just asking or having a set of questions to ask. I think it is letting the conversation be a pretty natural conversation so that people can feel comforted in that you truly are listening. When you talked about your previous supervisor, you said that it asked and you felt heard. Well, I think that, and and I think people feel heard when people genuinely listen. So I wouldn't go into that situation with any preconceived ideas. I really do believe that it's important to listen to what they're saying, because they have history. They have history with the organization. They have personal history and biases and all of those things. And it gives you a much clearer picture on how to interact and how to navigate change, because ultimately as leaders we're going to navigate change at some point, and I mean the last couple of years have proven that to all. But I think that you can navigate change easier when you understand the people that you're working with and the people that you're leading, and you understand their fears and their desires about what they want to do. And I think that if you just have those conversations and genuinely listen, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a natural segue to talk about. I think listening is, for me, it's top five leadership skills to be, for great leadership. And that's because I tend to really believe for leaders to be what we were chatting about before we started recording, around this idea of leading with compassion. But I want to ask you about leading with compassion, because the pushback that I get, or that I've seen, is this, oh, I don't want to, a sort of a hesitancy to lose control, to not be able to hold people accountable if I'm too compassionate. Sometimes people just need a bit of to be sort of driven to get the best results. So I'm interested to know, particularly with your role now, in the people side, in HR, of as an assistant superintendent in that space. How do you see compassionate leadership as still being able to drive high performance, or what would be your thoughts on that topic?
Sure. Well, I think that first of all, there's a distinction between leading and controlling.
Mm.
And when people are afraid of losing control, I think that they may be on the wrong track for leadership. When you're leading people and you're facilitating the work of the organization, I think that leaders are people that others follow, or that set an example for others. Controlling people typically just doesn't work very well. If your mindset is of I have to control the situation, I have to control everything around the environment. Those are typically leaders who find themselves in an environment that they can't control, because, quite frankly, it's going to be met with resistance at some point.
Mm-hmm.
The last, as we faced a global pandemic, uh, my staff was amazing, and they were fearful. We were all in our office one day, and the next day we were gone, and we
Mm.
had to being completely remote. And even though they had the tools to do that, they were reluctant in the past to utilize some of the technology that we had available to us. But we geared up really quick. They were huge troopers. I couldn't be prouder of the group of people I work with for what they did, because we didn't miss a beat, and we had lots of discussion and conversations around how are we going to do things differently. How do we conduct job interviews if we can't have people in person? How do we onboard new employees? How do we make sure that we have staff available? What do all these things look like? Not to mention, of course, school districts are highly unionized environments, and so we had three unions to deal with, and in working through challenges with them to sort through what does this kind of new normal look like. And I won't say that there weren't bumps along the way, but there were certainly opportunities for good conversations that helped us to center ourselves and find that path on what we were going to do and how we were going to navigate. So I think that when people are worried about losing control, I think the focus may be ruined. I think the focus needs to be on how are you a leader that people will follow,
Mm.
and how can you gain the respect of people to do it? And I'll tell you, I'm sure quite positively that there are some of my staff members that thought I was crazy and say, okay, we can do this, we can do it this way, and I think we can do this, and we can do that. And in the middle of all of this with the pandemic, we took on a major focus of kind of re-gearing our entire operational side of our human resources department, talking about what it was that we did and what our focus was and who we served and what role the department should play. And it actually brought us not only to rethinking how we did our work, but also changing our department to people services from human resources, because we felt that people services really was a better descriptor of what we did.
Mm.
Through a renovation of our department, out of 20 26 people, 24 people physically moved locations within the department by the time it was done. We used to have kind of two divisions between classified staff and certificated staff, and that got taken apart, and staff got relocated to different places. We brought on two new executive leaders that are focused around leadership development. It was a complete redo, and we did this in the throes of the pandemic at the same time we were trying to figure out how to redo our job, because it was opportunity, because we were already rethinking things. Let's rethink it and make it a real change. So but they did it, and I think they did it because I'm pretty passionate about it, and they worked hard to, even when they were worried about the changes, they worked hard to kind of say, okay, you say we can do this, okay, we can do this. I know we can do it, and and I gave them a lot of grace and saying, if there's a problem, we'll fix it. Don't worry, it's okay. If we
Mm.
try things and it doesn't work, the worst thing we could do would be to keep doing it wrong. So if something doesn't work, let's talk about it, let's fix it, and we'll recalibrate and move forward. And I think having that kind of out, so to speak, so that they didn't have to feel the pressure that if they made a mistake, the whole thing was going to fall apart. That I think that helped.
Mm. I think it's really profound how you started explaining that around the difference between leading and controlling, and if you're trying to control your thinking, you might be on the wrong track, and you need to think more about leading. That's so profound, and I love the example of you and your team through COVID. That's incredible. How, say there's a leader listening and they go, oh wow, yeah, Joe's right. If you're controlling, you're maybe on the wrong track, and they've just had a little epiphany that, oh, maybe I've been trying to control rather than lead. How do you make that shift? If someone out there has that self-reflection, what could they do or start doing, or how could they think differently to move from controlling to leading?
Well, first of all, I would say that I'm sure there's people out there that would disagree with this, but but my own personal take on that is you lead rather than control by number one, being open to being wrong,
Mm,
understanding that as human beings we all make errors, including those of us as leaders, and for the same grace that we need to give our staff when they make a mistake, we would hope to get that same grace in return.
mm,
But I think that making the shift would happen by first finding ways to build trust, because nobody is going to follow a leader that they don't trust. If
mm,
they are, they're following out of fear, and I mean, quite frankly, that's not the type of leader I'd want to be. I wouldn't want people to follow me because they're afraid of me. I would want them to follow me because they believe in me, and they believe that I have the best interest of the organization, or their best interests in mind. In a school environment, I'm very clear with staff that we really have one group that we serve, and that's kids. And it doesn't matter whether we're in the classroom with kids or not, our role is still there to support kids. So when we're talking about the people services side of an education organization, our job is to make sure that we're supporting, number one, we're putting the absolute best we can in front of staff or in front of students so that we're recruiting and finding high quality people. But the other thing is supporting not only our staff but our leaders so that their focus can stay on kids. I tell our leaders within our district all the time, if you are worried about something, please pick up the phone and call our offices, because we can help you with that. Let us take that burden off of you so that you're focusing on what's important, and that's kids. And so my staff know that for me, it's about kids. No matter what we're doing, we have to be making the situation better for our students and for the kids of our community. So I think, again, just kind of back to your point, I think people follow leaders who they trust and who they respect. And so if you're going to make that shift, you have to find a way to build trust and respect with your staff.
Yeah, I think I think you've really nailed it there. And the other thing that I love that you talked about is really purpose for you in a school setting. It's about the kids. It's about serving kids. It's about investing in kids. And if you can keep your eye on that, then that's also going to help you, I guess, lead people towards that. For a leader, how and as you mentioned, sort of in the introduction, as you sort of told some of your story, building unity and building trust seems to be something that you've done well in some, in the different locations and different contexts you've led. How do you build trust really well? Say there's a leader listening who goes, I'm desperate to build trust, but I just don't know how to do that. How do I do that?
Right. Well, it's not something you can command. So you can't force people to trust you. And sometimes you build trust by acknowledging that. I mean, I've pretty regularly, if I'm new in a role and I'm meeting with staff, one of the first things I say is, I want you to know that we're starting with a blank slate here, and I have no reason not to believe you or trust in you. And, unless you violate that trust, I'm going to give you my trust. I'm going to trust you. That being said, I also understand that I need to earn your trust. And so, if there's a time when you feel like like I've done something that's caused you to question whether or not you can trust me, I would hope you would come and talk to me about it, because I really am open and I want to understand. I mean, again, we're all human beings. We make mistakes. And if I did something or said something that struck you wrong or made you feel as though I had violated your trust or anything else, I think at that point, um, I would hope that we can have a conversation so that we can clear the air and move forward. And so I do try to foster open conversation. I think that staff having the ability to come anytime. I mean, I don't sit in my office with my door shut. If I'm in my office, my door is open, unless now, of course, now our new reality is we're oftentimes on online meetings. And so if I'm in a door is shut. But otherwise, my door's open, and my staff knows that they can stop in anytime. And when they stop, I stop what I'm doing. I pull around my desk and I give them my full attention so that I can have a conversation with them. And if I'm doing something that I have to finish or I can't give them that full attention, I'll ask permission and say, I'm going to listen to you, but I have to finish this email real quick. Are you okay if I'm typing while we begin this conversation, or whatever it may be, so that they understand that my attention is with them and that I want to truly hear what they have to say or help them to solve a problem or resolve an issue. And I think that there's a certain amount of vulnerability you have to have as well to show people that you can make mistakes and ask for some assistance with that, um, or just know that it's a safe place to be and that it's safe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you said some really good things there. I'm interested to know, because you are so active in, as you call it, people, the people services, and helping to find the right people, and I imagine being involved in managing people, and then the really difficult task that leaders don't want to have to do, but can be, depending on the situation, having to let people go. Starting with, I guess, when it comes to people, finding people, managing people, and then, well, ultimately that's what you want to do. You want to find great people, and you want to find a way to keep them on board and to lead them really well. What would be your advice on, I guess, some of the biggest things you've learned from really focusing in on people, hiring and keeping great people? What would be some of your keys to doing that?
Well, I think first you have to believe in what you're doing. Um, so I think people are purpose driven, and I think that I know I'm much more engaged when I believe that what I'm doing is bigger than just coming to work every day. And I think others respond to that as well. I think that when we paint the picture for someone that their job is bigger than just coming in and doing tasks, that it makes a difference. And so, when I talk about me talking about our decisions are made with the best interest of kids in mind, my staff believe that too. They understand that, they might be hiring somebody, and a piece of their job might be processing paperwork, but a piece of their job is also, how are you going to support that person? How are you going to help them to be successful? And how are we going to make sure that they are able to do good things for kids, and to um, uh, to carry on their work while helping others to be better. And so I think a big piece of what we do is painting a picture about the purpose behind what we're doing, so that people feel like they're part of something bigger. They're not just here to do a job. And quite frankly, if that's their purpose, if their purpose is just to come into a job, that's not going to be our best employee. We
Mm.
want people whose purpose is something bigger, that they feel more attached to the organization and the mission and the vision, um, and that they understand the values of the organization, and as well as feel like they are part of what we do, and that they're part and in success of the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Um, and when it comes to managing people, I think one of the biggest things is clear expectations and doing that really well. I think one of my weaknesses can be, definitely as a leader, is I can struggle to really get the detail, like, to a point. I sort of can give up a bit early on the detail, because I'm more naturally attracted to the higher level. So purpose every day of the week. But when it comes to really helping someone get really clear on what they're going to do in their role, and on what success looks like for them in their job, I'm interested to know your thoughts on how do you do that really well as a leader? Make sure the people on your team know exactly what it looks like to do their job, and to be successful doing what they're doing.
Well, I think that especially for a new employee, it's important for them to have mentorship by someone who is successful in the role. I won't pretend that I am the expert at everything that goes on in my department. I'm not. I My role is to provide the vision and help them to plan on how to move forward. But if it comes down to actually being the person processing hire or doing some of those things, I that's just not my where I'm at in the organization. And so I would not be able to to come in and tell an employee, well, to be really successful at your job, this is how you're going to process new hire paperwork, or this is how you're going to go about setting up interviews for employees. Now, I'm more than happy to be part of that conversation when we're brainstorming about how do we move interviews from in-person to virtual, how are we going to do these things, and to have those conversations. But I'm not the expert in those areas. My staff are the experts, and understanding that the history there and the people that are there are integral to that role and the success of the department. I'm not successful without them, and my my role with them is really around helping to guide them so that they can do what they know how to do, and to be able to manage in a way that they uh, are successful in their own individual roles, and that might look different for different people. So success can look different and feel different, and so I think when we're looking at people and trying to figure out how we manage to help them and to help them have success, we have to first step back and figure out, what does success for the organization look like? What does the big picture look like? But when it comes down to individual success for somebody, that might just mean, especially if they're new at their job, they processed their first new hire paperwork and didn't have any errors, and it just was very seamless. And that's success at that moment. But success is sensitive to time and place. So I think that we have to understand that as leaders, we don't necessarily know everything about the people we're trying to lead, or about their jobs. We're there to help them to be able to do that. The one quick story I can share is when I came on board in my current role, there was a person that worked in the office, and she was a wonderful human being, and she was getting near retirement age, and she was definitely a leader within the department. She was an assistant director, and so she oversaw a whole group of employees within the department. And and I sat down with her one day because staff came to me saying, one of the things we're really worried about is that she's planning to retire someday, and we're not going to know what to do when she's not here, because she is the person who kind of holds us all together. And so I sat down with her one day and I said, staff are really worried about this, and how are, I really would like you to think about this, and I'm not trying to push you out the door, because I hope you stay forever, because you're an amazing human being, and we're better because of you. But if you are thinking about retiring, I hope that you will do some work with staff so that they won't feel lost and they'll know what to do when you're not here. And she just looked at me and she shook her head. She goes, Joe, they know exactly what to do. They just don't think they know what to do, but they'll know exactly what to do. They're fine. She goes, I've been building capacity with these guys for years. They know. It's like, okay, I trust you. And so we had a situation where she suddenly passed away, and it was terrible. I mean, she was one of these people that meant so much to the organization, especially to the department.
Wow.
And but in the blink of an eye, she was gone, and the staff was just like, "Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this?" And I said, "You know what? I talked to her not long ago about this, and her response is, they know what to do, and that she would not have lied to me. So I'm very confident you know what to do." And they picked up the pieces and they moved forward, and they didn't miss a step, and they did know what to do.
Wow.
She had built that capacity in them, even though they didn't realize it. They knew what to do. They had questions, but not one person held all that knowledge, but collectively they all did. And so by working together, they were able to move forward. And again, it was, we still miss her terribly, but she did an amazing thing in preparing that staff to be ready for a time when she was there.
Wow. What a legacy She left, and just so profound that she literally said to you, Joe, they've got it. They know what to do. I've built their capacity, and then her legacy only proved that they were able to, to actually not miss a step in living up to her legacy after she'd sadly passed away. Wow.
And it's important for all leaders, really. If when we leave a role, I mean, hopefully not in that way, but if we just leave to move on to something else, if the organization suffers by our absence, then I don't think we did a very good job of leading. Because a part of what we do when we lead is we build capacity in others. If I were to leave my department or my organization right now, there's a whole group of people who could step in and do what they needed to do. And and I would like to say that I wouldn't be missed, but I do believe that they could move the organization forward without me, and that's how it should be. We never should be in a role where we control all the moving parts, so much so that not only that that when we're not there, it doesn't function anymore. I think we do everybody a disservice when we don't build capacity in others, and it's kind of self-serving when as a leader you take on that role of being the person who knows everything and controls all the moving pieces. I think that only thing that's good about that is it makes you feel good about the job you're doing, but it doesn't really protect the organization or create a legacy to leave behind of the capacity you built.
Yeah, well said. I completely agree, and that's a profound thought to land on today. I guess as we wrap up, did you have any final thoughts that come to mind for those leaders who might be listening?
No, I just think it's important to be authentic. Be authentic. Listen. Listen as much as you speak. Be willing to put yourself back in a role where you can truly listen to people and try to understand their perspectives and where they're coming from. I think when we do that, we become better ourselves and better leaders. Uh, there's importance and power to the collective wisdom of the group you work with, and understanding that and embracing that is, I think, how we lead in an authentic way that is beneficial not only to ourselves but to our organization and to those that we serve.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been an absolute joy having you on the podcast, Joe. I just think you've got so much wisdom around compassionate leadership and how to bring unity and team. And so thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been great to have the chance to chat with you today.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. A big thank you to all of our listeners. Really appreciate you. And the heart of this podcast and the heart of Clarity is to invest in people to become everything you're meant to be. And so I trust, I honestly just believe that today's conversation has been doing that. And I believe it's an investment in your leadership to listen to people like Joe. And just want to encourage you and thank you to those who already have. But if you haven't, if you could subscribe or follow wherever you're listening, it does help us to keep you in the loop. And if this episode has been really helpful for you, then please consider sharing it with your network, because we would love to be able to have some new listeners who come and listen, because we would love to invest in some more leaders to become the very best they can be. So thank you again for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org, We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me. Well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 Questions on Leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, John O'White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out John O'White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.